Alright, when it comes to 3D printed parts, we typically have to sand all these layer lines off. However, with it being 2024, they have come out with new technology to make this whole process a lot smoother and quicker and more ergonomic. I'm sure you noticed the resin 3D printers, they come with this liquid plastic. What we can do is we can actually take this liquid plastic and put it on the surface of our print, cure it, and that way it smooths out all these layer lines for us. Or at least covers them, so that the whole surface is smooth. Now before we get to this point, what you want to do is make sure you get rid of all the excess stuff from your print. For example, these little leftover sections from the brim, go ahead and you can remove those with like a Dremel. Same thing with the seam. I actually recommend using a wood burning tool. You'll actually end up smoothing these out. You'll be melting the plastic and smoothing these out. So any sort of like really major stuff that's not part of the print, you can go ahead and either melt or remove it, sand it, whatever you have to do to get that taken away. But for the majority of the print, we're talking like 99%, we can go ahead and use this technique with the resin. And also before even applying this resin, you want to have your PPE on. So your gloves, a respirator. I prefer the 6923. However, I'm sure there'll be a better one by the time this video comes out, or when you're watching this video. And also, you're going to want a non-absorbent surface. Now, this resin can be absorbed with like a paper towel if you do need to clean up. However, we don't want the surface to be sucking away our resin while we're trying to paint it. So that's why I recommend the non-absorbent one. In this case, you notice I'm just using a trash bag. If you want to have a dedicated mat that's like plastic, that's fine too, but it's not always needed. So once you have your surface prepped, as in all your seams are gone, all the brims gone, or any sort of support leftover is gone, you're going to go ahead and take a sponge brush, and you're going to take it and you're going to paint the surface that you want smooth. Now you can go ahead and put a generous amount on, like initially, just to make sure everything gets filled. However, before we cure it, we want to make sure that everything is nice and even and smooth. Because whatever shape this liquid is taking, that's what it's going to be when it hardens. So if you want a lumpy surface, you won't smooth out. But if you want a smooth surface like we do, you'll take the time to smooth everything out, get rid of the excess, maybe kind of squeegee this brush off a little bit, suck up any sort of excess. Now this won't be perfect, it's just a demonstration, but I'm just kind of showing a technique. And also don't be afraid to like really get on the edges and get off the print just to make sure you get all the edges. Oh, and one more thing. Now this is a relatively flat surface. If you do have a surface that has like canyons or cracks or places where this resin can pool, you want to get those flattened out and like all the excess sucked up. The thing is, once we cure it, in the next step, there'll be a layer of hard plastic, but underneath there'll actually be like a reservoir of liquid resin. And you don't want that in your print where it'll expand and possibly break the layer of plastic we're creating. So once you're satisfied with the plastic layer you placed on, you can go ahead and get your UV light. UV lights are very cheap, so don't be intimidated by this part. And all you're going to do is just apply the UV light to the surface. This will be an instant chemical reaction. It's actually going to cure it and harden it. So, and with that, use that. There it is. The surface is hardened. Notice sometimes it will connect to the bag. But you go ahead and just break that off. This is a perfect example. It actually hardened that quick. But if you are being careful, this won't happen to you. Now, I typically like to use 2 layers because I can still feel some of the ridges. So we'll go ahead and apply that second layer like I recommend. Same thing as before. You can apply a generous coat just to make sure it gets everywhere. But by the time you're done, you want to make sure everything is perfectly smooth, no bumps or anything, no like higher densities of resin anywhere. Like I said before, you might want to squeegee out your brush, get the excess off. Really make sure like those really aggressive layer lines definitely coated. Go over them a few times, maybe back and forth. Maybe one direction, not that bad, but one direction will make everything a little bit more uniform. Once you're satisfied, same thing as before, UV light, cure it. Instantaneous as before. Let's make sure you get all the sides, underneath. And with that, it is perfectly smooth. I'll see if you can, a little bit hard to see. I would kind of follow the glare. Now, yeah, so this definitely saved your wrist and your fingers and your sanity a lot by doing this. We got this done within 5 minutes, and that's with me explaining everything. At this point, if you want this to be a mirror-like smooth surface, you can sand this. This sands very well. Go ahead, do like your layers of grit. But this is a lot easier to sand than the initial 3D print that we had. That original, well, I did Petchy in this case, that original Petchy surface. You might do PLA. But yeah, so with that, you can go ahead, once it's as smooth as you want it, go ahead and apply your primer and your paint. And you can have a surface as smooth as this. I did 0 sanding on this one. There is 0 layer lines that are visible. And with that, I hope this saved you a lot of time, patience, and your insanity from not having to sand everything. And I really hope that this method does take off. This should be like the new cosplay norm, or 3D, any industry can use this, but this was mainly for cosplay, and I hope this is like the new standard for everybody. One thing I forgot to mention, it might be from how the resin's painted on, or just how resin is, or maybe you should wait before you cure it. I'm not sure, but you might notice some little bubble holes when you apply your primer to the surface. These can be easily filled just by doing another layer of primer or so. And I'm not talking like the whole thing. It might just be a little section here, a little section there, but the primer, multiple layers of primer will smooth up the surface. And same thing as before, you will at the end get a very smooth surface with little to no sanding whatsoever.